government of Venezuela called as cynical the report presented by the United States, including the South American country, in a list of nations that do not fully cooperate in the fight against terrorism. Authorities in Spain announced that police forces arrested 4 suspects involved in a vote buying scandal. And the Russian group South thwarted another attack by the Ukrainian armed forces. Hello from the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. This is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. The government of Venezuela called as cynical the report presented by the United States, including the South American country in a list of countries that do not fully cooperate in the fight against terrorism. As a response, Venezuela's foreign ministry recalled that the U.S. have sheltered and protected confessed terrorists, such as the Cubans Luis Posada Carriles and Orlando Bosch, who murdered 73 citizens in the 1976 attack against Cuba's flagship airline, Cubana Aviación. The Venezuelan executive repudiates that instrumentalization of such a sensitive issue to build unfounded accusations and points out that Washington's alleged anti-terrorist struggles have cost the world 4.5 million lives. The Foreign Affairs portfolio also stressed that Venezuela demonstrated its responsibility in this sensitive area year after year, fulfilling all national and multilateral obligations. On Tuesday, the Electoral Observation Mission of Guatemala expressed its concerns regarding irregularities and a growing judicialization, which may result in the total loss of legitimacy of the current electoral process. In a statement, the group of civil society organizations expressed that the current situation of the country is critical and reached this point due to the irresponsibility of political parties, which will not be adhering to the requirements of the laws and the electoral authorities. The mission also qualified as a negative the non-registration of the presidential formula of Telma Cabrera and Jordan Rojas of the People Liberation Movement Party. On Wednesday, the 7th Commission of the Chamber of Representatives of the Colombian Congress approved the health reform proposed by the government of Gustavo Petro with 14 votes in favor and 6 votes against. The Commission approved 143 articles that will change the country's health system and will allow the Colombians to have a health care model with quality infrastructure, health workers with proper salary, working conditions, and patients with comprehensive care, as said the Ministry of the Health in its Twitter account. Also, President Petro congratulated the congresspersons for the approval of the initiative, considered one of the pillars of his government. The reform proposes an operating model in which primary care centers and the comprehensive and integrated networks will be made up of public, private, and mixed entities. Ecuador's National Electoral Council approved the budget for the early presidential and legislative elections scheduled for August 20th. The budget approval came after the President Guillermo Lasso dissolved the National Assembly using the cross-death mechanism and brought forward the vote scheduled for 2025. Lasso's decision came as lawmakers tried to impeach him for not stopping a deal between the state-owned oil company or transport company and a private tanker company. Elections had to be called within 3 months for both the Assembly and the Presidency, and the winners will serve out the remainder of the terms of those elected officials. If there is no outright winner, a runoff vote will be held in October. In Guyana, officials have revealed that it was a student who allegedly sparked a deadly blaze that ripped through the dormitory of a girls' boarding school, killing 19 people. National Security Advisor Gerald Gouveia stated that the fire started with a teenage student who was upset at having her mobile phone confiscated after she was discovered to be having an affair with an older man. The fire was one of the deadliest in the recent years for the South American country. Approximately 9 people remain hospitalized hospitalized, many in serious conditions. Gouveia explained that the student, who is under the age of 16, lit the fire in the bathroom area of the dormitory. Leslie Ramzami, an advisor to Guyana's health ministry, confirmed that the suspect was being treated for burns at the hospital and is expected to be released into juvenile detention. And the episode of racism against the Brazilian football player Vinicius Jr. has already sparked outrage and demonstrations in Brazil, one of them in front of the consulate of Spain in the city of Sao Paulo. Parties, social movements, and anti-racist organizations took part in Tuesday's demonstration, expressing their indignation with what happened in the Spanish stadiums. They allege that this is not the first time that this type of discrimination occurs. The Ministries of Racial Equality of Brazil and the Equality of Spain also rejected the discriminatory actions, and in a joint note expressed that any racist, sexist, and fascist attitude inside and outside the soccer fields will not be tolerated under democracy values.
We are outraged with what has been happening. It is absurd that an entire stadium calls Vini monkey, as if he were not one of the best players that Brazil has today. It is not the first time it happens. It has been happening since the time of Pelé. We will no longer allow a young black and peripheral player to be treated like that. He was expelled from the match without having done anything.
Let's take a short break. But remember, you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Authorities in Spain on Wednesday announced that police forces arrested 4 suspects involved in a vote buying scandal. The civil guard confirmed that the number of detainees increased to 14 people in a vote buying scandal after the arrest on Wednesday in the town of Mojácar in Almeria, a city of the autonomous community of Andalusia, in addition to the autonomous city of Almeria, where the national police arrested less than a week before 10 people, also allegedly linked to the vote buying. Among the first detainees were members of the autonomous government of Melilla and the Coalition for Melilla party. The first 10 people arrested have been released after testifying before the police accused of electoral crime while waiting for the magistrate María del Carmen Perles, the head of the Second Court of Instruction of Melilla, who is in charge of the case, to summon them as accused in the next few days. And officials at Geneva Airport said demonstrators gathered at the airport's tarmac and briefly disrupted air traffic on Tuesday before operations gradually resumed. The warning came as environmental groups claimed that about 100 climate activists from 17 countries had disrupted the European Business Aviation Convention and the exhibition, Europe's largest private aircraft sales fair. In a joint statement, Greenpeace, Stay Grounded, Scientists Rebellion and Extinction Rebellion claimed the activists were peacefully occupying aircraft on display for event at Geneva Airport. About 1,000 police officers quickly intervened to evict the activists, including some who had attached themselves to the planes, according to the FTS news agency. Images released by the activists on Twitter show them sitting at the foot of the planes and displaying banners with slogans such as "Private jets burn our future, kill our planet," and "Fuel inequalities." The Algerian President Abdelmadjid Tebboune kicked off on Tuesday a 2-day state visit to Portugal. The African leader will meet with Algerian presidents, participate in a business forum, and hold discussions with Portuguese Prime Minister, among other things, said to take place during this day. This delegation includes the Algerian Ministers of Industry, Commerce, and Startups, as well as small and medium-sized enterprises. Last week, Portugal's finance minister said his country aims to multiply by 5 its investments in Algeria. Tebboune and his counterpart, President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, should also discuss bilateral issues, as well as regional and international developments. And the Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang held talks with Dutch Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Wopke Hoekstra in Beijing on Tuesday. In the meeting, Qin highlighted that the Netherlands is an important European partner and stressed that his government is willing to strengthen economic, trade and investment cooperation, deepen cultural and people-to-people exchanges, and advance multilateral cooperation in arms control, cybersecurity and climate change with the European nation. On the other hand, the Dutch Foreign Minister said that the Netherlands adheres to the One China policy and that was willing to work with the Asian country to uphold market principles, deepen cooperation in agriculture, innovation and other fields. The Dutch official also affirmed his government's commitment to serving as a facilitator in Europe-China exchanges and hoped that China will play a constructive role for the peaceful settlement of the Ukraine crisis. And during the Chinese-Russian Business Forum held in Shanghai, the chairman of Russia's VTB Bank, Andrei Kostin, said the Chinese yuan may replace the US dollar as the world's reserve and settlement currency in the next 10 years. According to Kostin, the monetary and financial system that has predominated for decades ensures the hegemony of the US and its Western allies, and the dollar and the euro account for 3/4 of global settlements. The chairman also said that the dollar is the world's main reserve currency. But having announced a course of containment of Russia and China, the collective West and the US in particular have been actively using their currency as a weapon. Russia has in recent months been strengthening its economic cooperation with China and adopting the yuan currency for trade. In early April, the yuan replaced the dollar as the most traded currency in Russia, and the Chinese currency continues to penetrate a number of other markets around the world. And on Wednesday, the President Xi Jinping received his Russian Premier Mikhail Mishustin in a meeting where the two leaders reaffirmed their country's determination to promote a multipolar world. The Chinese head of state and the Russian Premier declared that their nations and peoples are jointly resisting attempts by some Western countries to impose their will and maintain the world dominance. They also appreciated the good neighborliness and the strength of their cooperation, which is estimated to exceed 200 million euros in 2023. Mishustin's two-day trip is the highest-level visit by the Russian official to China since the start of the armed conflict in Ukraine. Now we move on to other topics. The Russian group South thwart another attack by the Ukrainian armed forces. The group's spokesperson, Vadim Stafiev, reported the attack took place in the towns of Adetyevka, Marinka, and Alexandrov Kalinovo, where significant casualties of personnel and armored vehicles of the Ukrainian armed forces were confirmed. Likewise, Stafiev assured the attack did not cause any losses to the Russian troops. Meanwhile, other offensives targeted positions of the Ukrainian units and an ammunition depot in Lysychansk and Zanovka. And the Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, warned on Wednesday that Moscow will respond harshly to attacks on Russian soil after jets and artillery fought off an armed group that crossed from Ukraine.
We will continue to respond promptly and extremely harshly to such actions by Ukrainian militants. The remains of the nationalists were pushed to the territory of Ukraine, where they continued to be defeated until they were completely eliminated. More than 70 Ukrainian terrorists and also vehicles and armored vehicles were destroyed.
TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. India's top female wrestlers led a candlelight march on nearly 1,000 protesters in the capital on Tuesday, demanding the resignation and the arrest of the president of the Wrestling Federation for allegedly sexually harassing young athletes. The demonstrators marched to India Gate, a monument close to the country's parliament building, with a strong presence of police along the route. The protesters have been staging the rally in the center of New Delhi for nearly a month amid a brutal heatwave while foregoing their training schedules. Two Olympic medalists, Bahram Punia and Shashki Malik, have threatened to hand back their medals if no action is taken against India's Wrestling Federation President Brish Bhushan Charan Singh. The 66-year-old president is accused of sexually harassing 7 young female wrestlers, including one minor. Singh, who represents the ruling Hindu nationalist Bharatiya Janata Party, has denied the accusations and called the protest politically motivated by the opposition Congress Party. And now we move on to other topics. On Wednesday in Turkey, the leader of the ultra-nationalist Victory Party confirmed his support for opposition candidate Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu in the second round of presidential elections next Sunday. Local media asserted that Turkey ultra-nationalist Victory Party leader Ümit Özdağ and the opposition candidate Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu signed a memorandum of understanding for the presidential runoff election. Özdağ's decision comes after candidate Sinan Oğan, who won nearly 2.8 million votes as the third presidential candidate, and earlier this week pledged his support for the President Erdogan. Kılıçdaroğlu also has the support of the main pro-Kurdish party, which accounts for 10% of the vote in the first round. Thousands of Israelis protested on Tuesday against the allocation of funds to ultra-Orthodox youth in the government's proposed state budget. The demonstration was organized by the same group of activists who have been protesting since January against the government's judicial reform plans, which they view as a threat to democracy. Ahead of the budget vote and bearing Israeli flags, the protesters marched through Jerusalem to parliament, accusing the ruling coalition of looting the state's money. On Monday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the state will grant myriad ultra-Orthodox Jewish men engaged in religious study rather than work the equivalent of $67.5 million. The grant was part of a last-minute deal with United Torah Judaism, one of the ultra-Orthodox coalition parties, to ensure their support for the budget. The United States and State Department warned the military junta and rapid support forces in Sudan that it will use all the tools at its disposal when it is appropriate to do so. In a press conference, the State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller confirmed that the U.S. government officials have been speaking since the fighting erupted with top Sudanese generals and other officials and will continue the dialogues to press them to stop the violence. Miller also told reporters that an internationally sponsored ceasefire monitoring mechanism is in place to protect the ceasefire in the North African nation. The agreement includes representatives from the Sudanese army, the Rapid Support Forces, paramilitary groups, the U.S., and Saudi Arabia. Recently, the warring sides agreed to a week-long ceasefire that started on Monday. However, there are already reports of violations. And now we address other topics. Super Typhoon Mawar barred the U.S. island of Guam as a powerful Category 4 storm on Wednesday, with high winds, heavy rains, and a dangerous storm surge that swamped long-lying areas as residents rushed to find shelter. According to the National Weather Service, Typhoon Mawar center passed over the northern tip of Guam on Wednesday evening, accounted as the strongest storm to hit the territory of over 150,000 people in decades. Guam's meteorology Service reported peak winds of 169 kilometers per hour. Lightning had become an increasing threat as conditions continued to deteriorate into the evening, with the Weather Service issuing extreme wind and flash flood warnings for northern Guam. Ahead of the storm, Guam Governor Lu Leon Guerrero ordered residents of coastal, low-lying and flood-prone areas of the territory to evacuate to higher elevations. In Mexico, the alert for the activity of the Popocatépetl volcano remains in place, although there has been a decrease in the last few hours. Let's see what activities are still affected in the following material from our correspondent, Daniel Rosas.
The Popocatépetl volcano is still on alert. However, its activity has decreased.
Its intensity has decreased. There is also less ash ejected. And we're watching day and night so that there is no alarm. We're watching.
Airport activities have resumed and the volcanic alert level remains at yellow phase 3, which is precautionary.
Also, all the airlines are already resuming their flights. In some cases, it is not the fault of the Don Goyo, because they have faults.
In the state of Puebla, the most affected by volcanic activity, 57,000 teachers are giving online classes to more than 1 million students and continue to be alert in the case of a possible contingency.
178 schools have been selected as temporary shelters located in 22 municipalities.
However, experts point out that the recent increase in volcanic activity has been fluctuating since 1994. It is therefore relatively normal.
There are times when the activity is very strong, like in 2000, which was the strongest activity we had. In fact, that was one of the eruptions that was well monitored, and we were very attentive as we are now, and the activity now is not yet at that level.
The authorities are still advising people to protect themselves from the volcanic ash. They should wear protective goggles and use a wet handkerchief to protect their eyes and respiratory tract.
Daniel Rosas, TeleSUR, Ciudad de México.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.